Today on TimesCast, hundreds of thousands of British public sector workers strike over proposed pension changes. Op-ed columnist Nicholas D. Kristof on the Sudanese president's visit to China.
China has to realize that it needs to apply pressure on Bashir and not just coddle him.
And sports columnist Jonathan Mahler questions the high cost of prosecuting athletes for doping. Just a day after massive protests in Greece, hundreds of thousands of British public servants walked off the job Thursday, protesting austerity measures that target pensions.
This was a relatively small strike. Several 100,000 people went out. But what unions have said is this might be a harbinger of much greater action in the months to come. Some of the larger unions haven't actually voted on strike action yet, but they're saying that the way things are going with negotiations over pensions, they could well follow if there's no breakthrough reached. And this is a sign also of what's going on around Europe. A lot of other countries are experiencing the same kind of unrest from workers, upset at budget cuts, upset at pension changes. And in Britain, one of the issues is the government has instituted a program of very deep, very quick cuts, with the idea that this would help stimulate the economy by making the markets happy, reducing the deficit. And that hasn't happened. The economy is growing very, very sluggishly. Consumer spending is actually down. Other economic indicators are pretty poor. And so a lot of economists are now questioning whether the government's approach is the right approach.
President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan is an indicted war criminal, indicted for genocide by the International Criminal Court. But today, he's in China. He was greeted with an honor guard with a meeting with President Hu Jintao. And the episode, I think, underscores the degree to which China is increasingly playing a crucial role in Africa. China has a long and close relationship with Sudan, partly because it buys most of Sudan's oil, and also it supplies an awful lot of Sudanese weapons. Those AK-47s, those RPGs that were used in Darfur, those are indeed, in many cases, from China. Now, some of that relationship is for the better. They provide a lot of foreign aid to Africa. They educate an awful lot of African students. But we're also seeing China buttress some really awful regimes, whether they be Sudan or Zimbabwe or countries abroad like Burma. To solve so many of these global problems, we need the world's rising power, China, inside the system. But China also has to realize that it needs to apply pressure on Bashir and not just coddle him. As long as it simply buttresses these regimes, it's part of the problem and not the solution.
And sports columnist Jonathan Mahler questions the cost and fairness of prosecuting two Texas athletes.
It's looking like it's going to be a rough month for fallen Texas sports icons. Next week begins the perjury trial for Roger Clemens, who's accused of lying to Congress about using performance-enhancing drugs. Meanwhile, it's the first week of the Tour de France, which of course is indelibly associated with Lance Armstrong, who may himself soon face criminal charges. It seems like a simple story. Two bad guys being brought down by the government. So why am I having such a hard time rooting for the government? Well, let's start with Clemens. There may be no one who seemed more deserving of his comeuppance than Roger Clemens. He was always a bully on the mound, and ever since the charges were first brought against him, he's been nothing but defiant, arrogant, angry, and yet, somehow, I still find myself looking at him as a kind of victim, as someone who's the fall guy for really a baseball-wide conspiracy of willful blindness as the game surged in popularity with the rise of steroids. And Armstrong? Should we be surprised that that carefully constructed mythology may not in fact have been true? And particularly in cycling, a sport whose history is rife with incidents of doping. Now, I'm hardly condoning the actions of these men, but is this really something we need to be devoting precious government resources to? I mean, after all, we've hardly prosecuted any of the executives of the major financial firms who nearly brought our entire economy down. So maybe the real lesson here is that it's time to put sports back in their proper place. It's time to start looking at these men not as heroes or villains, but as athletes. Athletes who played their games at a time when their games were dirty. But that doesn't mean that we can't all hope to still witness some inspiring sports moments that aren't ultimately tainted by performance-enhancing drugs.